Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next left turn on the VSN Variety Sports Network. You know where we are, you know what we're here to do. Let's break down the Phoenix Shriners Children 500, the battle in the desert. Um, Great track, a little bit of a different track. It's our first short track of the season. It's 1 mile, 312 laps, 500 kilometers. That's how we get the Shriners Children 500 out of this. So let's break it down real quick. Set the stage. So like I said, 312 laps. Stage 1 was 60 laps. Stage 2 was 125, and Stage 3 was 127 laps. The fuel window for this track was 92 to 98 laps today, and we had two beautiful A10 Thunderbolt 2s do the flyover before the race started today. The theme of the day, again, as it's been all season, was what's this new downforce short track downforce package going to do, and to take the dog leg or to not take the dog leg. That was seen throughout the entire race. Let's get down to it. We get a start out there, and we get a caution real quick and early. Again, been a theme this year. We get a wreck every race inside the first 10 laps. This week, lap 6. Kraus is in turn 1, just loses control. Nobody touches him. Nobody bumps him. He slides, turns. He ends up sliding up, collecting Austin Cindric, collects Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon again gets collected in the first 10 laps of the race. The guy cannot catch a break to start the season. When Cindric got hit, he brushed up a little bit and made a little bit of contact with Josh Berry, but nothing too much. Berry continued to race and was on the lead lap for a long time. After the first caution, it was really kind of chill. It was a really chill race. Lots of green flag racing. I mean, the restart, like all the restarts have been, not as bad, obviously, because we weren't drafting and we weren't the high speeds at the starts. But the restarts at Phoenix matter so much because coming across the start-finish line, you got the dog leg and you head into one. This is where the whole two dog leg or not two dog leg comes in. Well, this year so far, Chevy has really, really been out there. They've won every race. They've been very dominant. They've been coming up in the clutch. Well, today it was somebody else's turn, and that was Toyota. But before we dive deep, because that first caution is just kind of like, it was like a pre-start to the race, and then we actually start the race. So let me set everything up for you. The new short track package for most of the drivers, they don't know really what to expect. There was a testing session for Toyota back out in December. Everybody said Christopher Bell's car had it figured out. So there's a precursor to the race. The other part of the strategy here is you got to be good on the restarts because you got to be able to make that cut of dog leg or stay up on top of the track. It's a different so the big difference with the aero package, and we talked about this every week because it's the new 7th gen car. It's been around for a couple seasons, but now they're really getting into deep dives and letting us know what the differences are. So what we've had on the first 3 races this year is the diffusers on the back end of the cars on the underside have had 5 fins to create more downforce. We covered all this last week. Well, this week, the diffuser on the rear end of the car is much, much smaller and not really visible from the behind the car. They showed it before the race. Larry Mack goes over the details just like normal. So instead of having 5 fins on that rear diffuser, there were only, is it 2 today? Were there only 2 today? I believe there were 2 fins on it today. And it was 2 fins. So what that does is it takes away some of the downforce that comes underneath the car, but to add a little bit of downforce. It wasn't the 7-inch spoiler that we were seeing at the super speedways, but it was a little bit taller than the 4-inch spoiler we saw last week at Vegas. So these were the concerns the drivers were going to have. They only got 20 practice laps on Friday before qualifying, so they only really knew what the cars were going to do for the first 20 laps. This was a common theme throughout the race as well. And they knew there would be a lot of long green flag racing in this race. So a lot of the teams decided to set those tires up with the lowest air pressure they could, which, it's got its pros, but it's got its cons. It makes the tires last a little bit longer, but you don't have as much control right off the bat. You got to wait for the temps to come up to really get the handling in the car. And with those lower temperatures, what happens is the front end of the car doesn't want to turn and bite in that left turn right off the bat. So you feel like you're pushing a little bit. And then as soon as it does bite, your rear end wants to slide on you a little bit. And you start chasing the car up the track. We saw that quite a bit today. But as the race went on, cars got it figured out. There were a few drivers in particular who were really, really strong on the long runs, and that made a big difference throughout the rest of the race. Um, so Hamlin started on the pole with Ty Gibbs. It's Ty Gibbs' best career start. Again, start doesn't go as we had hoped, planned, what we all hoped it was going to be. We get the caution at lap 6, and then we get another restart. Well, Ty Gibbs, I mean, he was just phenomenal today. After the restart, he jumped out in the lead right off the bat, and he just went. And nobody was going to catch him. His car was handling fantastic. He had great leads. I mean, he was running 1.5 to 2.5 second leads that whole time. He wasn't burning through gas. He never got loose, never really lost control of the car. But with about 8 laps left in stage 1, Tyler Reddick, who also had a fast car. I mean, he was never really out of it. I mean, he was there, but he was always at this comfortable distance behind Gibbs at the beginning of the race. Well, Reddick finally starts catching up. And at this point, Gibbs has already messaged into the radio crew saying, "Hey, my brakes are getting hot." And he said that originally like lap 35. And we're lap 50, 52 right now. But Reddick starts pressuring Gibbs, and they do some good racing. It's good, clean racing. It was a lot of good, clean racing today. And Reddick finally gets around Gibbs with 3 laps left. And once he gets around Gibbs, he's gone. I mean, in 3 laps, he got 0.6 of a second separation. So Reddick's car was really, really was dialed in for that first stage. My side note was this was Tyler Reddick's first stage win of 2024. Toyota dominated. I mentioned at the beginning, Chevy has really dominated so far this year. Toyota dominated today, especially in the first stage. The top 4 finishes in the first stage were all Toyotas. It was Hamlin, Reddick, Gibbs. Who was the other 4th? I don't remember the 4th one because we went right into pits. We had to get those changes in. There wasn't a whole lot of action in the first set of pit stops in between stage 1 and stage 2. But at the end of that, Hamlin, who was in the first pit box because he had the pole, ends up with the lead. Reddick comes out in second. Byron in third. Chase Elliott, who's been really quiet this year, haven't heard a lot about him after his rough season last year. He comes out 4th, and Gibbs is 5th. And that's how we would restart the second restart. Hamlin gets out on the second restart, really goes. It's not a lot of action here. It's just good, clean racing at this point. There's not been a lot of action. There's not been a lot of rubbing. There hasn't been a lot of bumping. You haven't seen cars brushing the walls. You're seeing the guys get a little loose and a little wiggle out of 1 and in between 1 and 2, but nothing crazy. It's not your typical short track race, but Phoenix isn't your typical short track either. You're used to getting a lot of long green flag runs. So as we continue, the action's really between Ty Gibbs and William Byron. They were the most entertaining part of stage 2 at the beginning. They were just back and forth for 4th and 5th place. It was a lot of really good racing. It was one guy would cut the dog leg while the other guy stayed up in the turn. The next lap they'd switch. I mean, it was a lot of back and forth using the entire track. At this point in the race, the track had started to widen up. In that first stage, we only saw the cars really sticking in those bottom 2 lanes. We would see cars up in the 3rd lane. But not as often and not run nearly as strong. But with the Phoenix track, it's always known, this track gets wider the longer the cars are on the track, especially with all the green flag racing and no rain, which we're in the desert, so we don't get much of that anyways. But man, it was 3, 4, 5 wide racing all the way down the front stretch through the dog leg. I mean, we were seeing 6 cars push into 7 wide through the dog leg, which again isn't anything new, but it's something I am paying more attention now that I'm covering the races. It's really incredible. On a short track that doesn't have all the banking, the cars are carrying 156 to 160 miles an hour through the dog leg across the front stretch into turn 1. It really is phenomenal. It makes for good racing. It's a lot of fun. And like I said, there were no accidents, no cautions. So the racing just kept going. It really was quite fantastic. Eric Jones really had a great car through stage 1. He was there. He wasn't challenging for the lead, but he was in the top 5. He was keeping pace, but he had a rough pit stop at the stage change, and it really, really set him back. And not just positions he lost at the starting grid, because he ended up starting 10th in the second stage, but his car just would not run the same as it did in stage one. Now we all know that the clean air always helps the cars run faster, cleaner, more grip, the whole 9 yards. And you always see a bit of a drop off when cars are back in the field. But it seemed like Jones's car just wouldn't run right. I mean, he wasn't complaining about handling; it just wouldn't go. He just couldn't get the speed he needed. Um, Side note here also as well, this is the biggest dog leg we have in NASCAR. It's not the only track with the dog leg, but it's the biggest and the most prominent. If you didn't know that, now you know. I didn't, now I know. So 32 laps into stage two, Martin Truex Jr. really starts to become noticeable. He started in the middle of the pack to start the race. He wasn't doing anything crazy. His car wasn't a rocket. His handling was good, but he wasn't anybody I was concerned about at the beginning of the race. But before you know it, he's all the way up into sixth place, and he's challenging for a top 5 spot. Again, we're just green flag racing, no cautions, no major action. At this point, we're about a third of the way through the race. Hamlin is still holding on to a comfortable lead with just about 2 seconds over everybody else in the field. At this point, Christopher Bell gets noticed. He started in the back of the pack, and real quietly, just good, clean driving all day long, working his way through the field. And his car on these long runs just was, it appeared his car was so much better than everybody else. Just so much better than everybody else. Like no one else's car quite had the handling and maintained the speed and kept the tires up the way Bell had the car set up between his team and the way he was driving today. He looked really, really good. At one point, it was, I really thought we're never going to see another caution. Like stage two is going to go all the way, and this is just what it's going to be. But because stage two was 125 laps, you had to have some green flag pit stops, which thank God we needed some action. Because yes, there's some good clean driving on the racetrack, but nothing really going on to shift it up because there wasn't a whole lot of movement on the track as we were going through this race. I mean, cars were trading places. There were guys moving up and down through the field, but it wasn't like when we were in Atlanta where we were having 33 position changes per lap. By the way, I told you I would keep up with that. Haven't seen anything that high since. So first set of green flag stops come, and they were kind of guessing when it was going to start on when you're listening to the commentators during the race. But Ryan Blaney is the first one in on lap 56 of the stage, and once the first car comes in, everybody else is going to start coming in. So Ryan Blaney comes in, he gets the first stop, in and out the way. Next thing you know, tons of cars start diving onto the track or onto the pit lane. I'm sorry. Hamlin was the leader, so he waited 3 laps to get in. So he let a lot of the cars get into the pit lane and go ahead of him. And he was playing the fuel mileage game, trying to wait out as best he could, running those tires as long as he felt safe. The surprising part here was Todd Gilliland, Kyle Busch, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Carson Hocevar, and Mr. Kraus, who was responsible for the first accident of the day. They all stayed out. And, I mean, they stayed out and stayed out. Kyle Busch stayed out and pitted on lap 65 of the stage, so he waited 9 laps. But Gilliland stood out there forever, and I mean forever. And what he was doing at this point was he was hoping for a caution. They made a bet. They made a bet on strategy, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna place this bet. There's gonna be a caution sometime before the end of stage 2. We're gonna stay out, and not make the green flag pit stop because the fuel window was so big, and all he had to do was deal with the tires. That hopefully there'll be a caution. We can come in and get tires, and then we'll get the pit in front of everybody. Or at least if cars stay out, we're not going to be as far back in the field." Unfortunately for that team, it didn't work out. Ty Gibbs, I just want to touch on this real quick, was so strong in stage 1, and his car was handling so well. Like I really thought it was going to be Gibbs to get the win today, just from the way the car ran through stage 1 and stage 2. But stage 2, he had to start back a little bit because they didn't get the right rear tire on. The right rear tire changer took the right stance and made sure the tire was on right instead of risking it not being all right and coming off on the track and incurring a penalty like Chris Buescher's team did last week. We got to keep going. We're still rolling in stage 2 at this point. Gilliland is still on the track. I mean, he's still on the track with 47 laps left in the stage. So he was on those tires for Well, man, he ran that fuel as long as he possibly could, right around the 92 laps, and pushed those tires out as far as he could. Um, but Gilliland finally gets passed by Reddick and Hamlin with 47 laps left in stage two. Um, at this point, he waits a little bit longer. He drifts back through the field, finally gets his green flag pit stop in. Um, but to backtrack just a little bit, I want to give you a recap. We're at lap 142. Reddick is in the lead. There's been 4 leaders, 5 lead changes, and there's 25 cars on the lead lap at this point. Things are going to change. Christopher Bell, again, long run, silently. He's climbing up. He's in the top 5, sitting in 4th place. Somebody we talk about every week because he's such a strong contender, 2-time defending NASCAR champion, Joey Logano. Logano was really, really strong the first 3 weeks of the season, started on the front row the first 3 weeks, 2 poles, has had some bad luck. Well, it seemed like the luck just never was good at all for the 22 team this week. Didn't do well in qualifying, didn't even make it into the final stage of qualifying. So he started way further in the back in the field than he's used to. The car really just never had the speed. He talked about it, how, it was handling great. They didn't really have a problem there, but they just never got the speed he was looking for. This was his 400th career start, and this is one of his best tracks. So people really looked for Logano, even though he had a bad qualifying setup, to move through the field and be up front come the end of the race. Blaney, the defending NASCAR champion, also really quiet all day, but he kept hanging around the top 10. He started back in like middle of the field, 15, in the teens somewhere, but worked his way up the top 10 ever since the middle of stage 1. He stayed there all day. 23 laps to go in stage 2. Kyle Busch goes a lap down. So we're seeing a lot of the big names in this race not make it. I mean, Hamlin was up there for a long time, but your Kyle Busch's, your Joey Logano's, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. I mean, your big dogs, your blue chip guys. They're just not having the best day. And Hendrick's been fantastic all season. We covered that last week as well. So Gilliland makes his stop with 22 laps left. I'm sorry I jumped out of order there. My apologies. And I explained that they were hoping for a caution that never happened. Now, Christopher Bell's team got his car right. And when I say they got his car right, I mean it was more right than it was earlier in the race when he's just started being dominant in the long runs. He finally gets up to Reddick, who's in the lead. He passes Hamlin, passes Reddick with 5 laps to go in stage 2. And once he cleared Reddick, he was gone. It was almost the exact same thing that happened at the end of stage 1 when Reddick passed Gibbs and Reddick took off, except this time Bell got past Gibbs or past Reddick and he was gone. He's gone. He just big stretch. Stage 3, lots of green flag racing. There's a Bell wins stage 2. Sorry, I jumped ahead again. Sorry, getting ahead of myself tonight. Bell wins stage 2. Toyota wins the second stage, so they've taken stage 1 and stage 2. At this point, Toyota has led every single lap of the race except for 14 of them. Let me reiterate that. There were 60 laps in stage 1. There were 125 laps in stage 2. That's 185 laps. Toyota had led every single one of them except 14 to this point. Toyotas were locked in for this race. That December test period they had out there at Phoenix really started paying off. So we get to the stage change. Obviously, we know we got to have some pit stops here. So we get a very similar starting lineup for stage 3 that we had to start stage 2. It's Hamlin, Reddick, William Byron, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, and Martin Truex Jr. win the battle coming out of the pits. Okay, so that's our top 6 starting stage 3. Stage 3 gets a lot more interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you, if you record the race and to get to watch it, watch the beginning of stage 1, watch the end of stage 1. Don't worry about stage 2 so much, except for maybe the green flag pit stops, and then watch stage 3. So stage 3, right off the start, we are 6 wide going through the dog leg, pushing 7 wide. It's not like it's something you never see, but when they're giving you that aerial shot, you just see the cars start diving. It's almost like a scene, like Fast and the Furious 2, or Too Fast, Too Furious, the second movie they made with Paul Walker and Tyrese, when they're down there in Miami, and they get all the cars into the parking garage, and they all come out to split to lose the drug guys. Yeah, that's kind of what it looked like. Cars just dart everywhere. It was fantastic. Um, so we keep rolling, and again, the blue chip guys, the big dogs, continue to have rough days. Kyle Busch spins out on lap 196, brings out the second real caution of the day. No contact with anyone or any walls. Saved the car, kept it in good shape. The odd thing here was he spun out in almost the exact same spot that Kraus spun out on lap 6 in stage 1. This is also a spot where you saw the cars get loose all day. The rear ends just kind of kept sliding out. So I'm sure NASCAR is going to look at that. Goodyear's going to look at that. The teams are going to look at it and see what they can do going into the fall race here. Bell restarted 10th for stage 3 because, again, another tire wasn't on all the way. A veteran crew member stopped and made sure the tire was on all the way to make sure they didn't incur a penalty later on in the race. We get another caution now. Lap 205. Another blue chip guy, one of them big dogs, Joey Logano, gets wrecked. He collects Kraus and LaJoie in this accident. So what happens here is they're going into turn 1. John Hunter Nemechek just not slams into, but I mean, racers know there's a difference between a little bit of a bump or a push and getting ran. Well, Nemechek ran Logano into that turn. Spins Logano out. Logano slides up the track, collects LaJoie, then collects Kraus. Zane Smith gets a little bit of damage. Josh Berry gets a little bit of damage on this too, but those two got to continue racing. This was the end of the day for Logano, LaJoie, and Kraus. And we lead to now we get caution, we get pit stops. You think this is where strategy is coming in, guys. Okay. This is lap 205. It's 312 lap race. Pit window, I want to remind you, 92 to 98 laps. Tires, you can push them 70, 75, maybe 80 laps. So now it's time for teams to really start considering strategy to go. Not all the cars pit. Surprise, surprise. The cars up front do not pit. The cars that are kind of like 10th on back pit. You see a little bit mixing up here. So with 100 laps to go at the restart, because we actually restart with 100 laps left, it's Hamlin, Reddick, Truex Jr. up front, and those three just kind of take off the start. They leave everybody else back. There's a big, big gap. Shortly after the restart, we get another caution. Denny Hamlin spins out and collects no one. Slides all the way down the racetrack into the open, doesn't hit a wall, nothing goes on. Again, this is in turn 1, just like the first 2 accidents are going in turn 1. Just gets loose and slides. I'm sure the Goodyear and NASCAR is going to look at this and figure out why so many cars were getting so loose at this point and why it caused the accidents it did. At this point, Truex Jr. and Larson, so this caution happens. Truex Jr. and Larson now stay out while all the leaders hit pit road. Now, obviously, this is a risk. Truex and Larson are obviously, seems like they're taking the same risk that Gilliland took in stage 2, kind of hoping for another caution to come out to where they can pit in front of everybody and they got track position. We'll see how that pans out. Restart with 92 laps left. It's Truex Jr., Ryan Preece, Gilliland, Buescher, and Chastain are your starting top 5. Bell is all the way back in 19th because, again, slow on pit road. Things are now starting to get interesting. We're starting to see some true, real, what we desire in short track racing. Bubba Wallace gets loose, slides up the track, hits Eric Jones. Eric Jones slides into the wall, saves the car. Nobody else gets involved. Fantastic save by Eric Jones, but he falls like 20 spots back, and everybody just keeps going. So he's just kind of eliminated at that point, at least from contention. He's still in the race. No big deal there. We get down a few more laps, 77 laps to go. Truex now has a gap of nearly 2 seconds over Ryan Preece, who's in second place. Again, these guys did not pit, and Truex knows he can make it on fuel, but he's worried about the tires. You hear this communication between the pit crew and Truex during the race. Now we're starting to see cars move. Who's sneaking up again? Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell from 19th. By lap 61, or with 61 laps left, so that's 16 laps later, plus another 14, 15, 16. So within 32 laps, he's climbed up to 5th position. And again, we're just got good, clean racing at this point. Not a lot of rubbing, not a lot of bumping. We're not seeing a whole lot of contact with anything. We get to about 40 laps left, and Truex Jr. finally surrenders the lead. He was out there for like 80 laps on tires. Tires were finally given away. He had at one point like a 3.5, 4 second lead. That because the tires were so worn, it had gone away. At this point, Truex Jr. surrenders the lead. Bell takes the lead, and that's really about all she wrote, ladies and gentlemen. Bell's car was fantastic on these long runs, and I cannot understate that enough. I mean, he was gone with 19 laps left. He was carrying a steady lead right around 5 seconds, anywhere between 4.75 and 5. I mean, he was just rolling. The car was locked in. He was locked in all the way from back in December to today. It helped out. Christopher Bell gets his 7th win of his career. First win at Phoenix. His 7th win, side note, in his 148th race is his 7th different track he's won at. The kid is versatile. He's young. He's going to be around for a long time. Joe Gibbs has a very good racer there in that number 20 car. Toyota gets a clean sweep of the day. They take stage 1, stage 2, and the race overall. Buescher finishes 2nd. Ty Gibbs in 3rd. Brad Keselowski in 3rd. Ryan Blaney in 5th. Brad Keselowski in 4th. Ryan Blaney in 5th. Chastain in 6th. And Truex Jr., who had made the late green flag stop, got the fresh tires, flew up through all the traffic, and finished 7th today. I want to give you the rest of the running order since we don't have it on the scroller this week. So I stopped at 7th. That was Martin Truex Jr. Michael McDowell finished 8th. Chase Briscoe 9th. Tyler Reddick, great day for him. Fantastic day. He was up front all day. Some things just didn't work out in stage 3 for him, but he still gets the top 10 finish in points. Denny Hamlin, even after his late spin, finishes 11th. Noah Gragson has a fantastic day, one of the best days of his career in NASCAR, finishes 12th. Daniel Suarez, who won 2 weeks ago, finishes 13th. Kyle Larson finishes 14th after a very quiet, non-dominant day, a very un-Kyle day for him. Carson Hocevar with a great finish at 15th. Bubba Wallace, 16th. Todd Gilliland, 17th. William Byron, 18th. Chase Elliott, 19th. Alex Bowman, 20th. Those are 3 teammates. They finished 18th, 19th, and 20th. They're all Chevys. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. took 21st. Kyle Busch, 22nd. Ryan Preece ended up in 23rd after being up front for quite a while there in stage 3. Justin Haley finished 24th. John Hunter Nemechek, 25th. Josh Berry, 26th. Harrison Burton, 27th. Daniel Hemrick, 28th. Zane Smith, 29th. Kaz Gralla, 30th. Eric Jones finishes 31st. Austin Dillon, again, in the bottom of the field, he really, really needs to find a win because he's slipping behind in stage points. If this team's going to want to compete later on in the year, they're going to have to stop racing for stage points, and they're going to have to start racing for wins. That's just what it's going to be for them. Corey LaJoie finishes 33rd. Joey Logano, disappointing in for him, didn't finish the race, finishes 34th. Derek Cross finishes 35th. And Austin Cindric finishes last place, 36th, only getting 6 laps in for the race. Guys, good race. Not nearly as exciting as we were all hoping for. Not as exciting as those first 3 races of the season. But let me tell you what, we have got one on for next week. We're heading to Tennessee, ladies and gentlemen. We're back at Bristol for the Food City 500. And personally, I'm a little disappointed no dirt. But heck, I've always loved Bristol. I loved it growing up as a kid. It's my favorite track to watch. You never know what's going to happen. And it can be anybody's race. It's so much fun. I love Bristol. I hope you guys will join me next week. We're going to recap again 9:15 next week, Sunday night. Come on in. We're going to talk Bristol. It's going to be a dang good time. I'm hoping for a lot of good racing, hoping for some good accidents, but nothing that takes cars out. We want to have a nice full track at the end of that race. But again, thanks everybody for coming in. Check out the Variety Sports Network page. If you like this, share it, subscribe, tell your friends, share on Facebook, share on X. Check out a bunch of our other content, 7th inning stretch, the double-double, talking the gridiron, wrecked with Ranger. We got everything. Check out the new 314 St. Louis show. That's all St. Louis sports talk. That's the Blues, the Cardinals, St. Louis City, and the Battlehawks, who are coming for a championship for the inaugural UFL season this year. Thank you so much, everybody. You have a fantastic week. Be safe. We'll see you next week.